So I'm actually pretty spoiled. This is a picture from a website of a restaurant. I was at DevOps Days Amsterdam, and I was sitting with Jason Yee, who you saw speak yesterday, and Jason Han from VictorOps, two pretty awesome people. Pro tip, if you end up following the DevOps Days circuit at all, and Jason Yee's going to a restaurant, follow him. It's phenomenal. And we were talking about stuff, and the State of the DevOps report came up, came up, which is good reading, you should read it. And I was mentioning that one thing in particular really stood out to me about this year's version. They measure high performers, low performers, and one of the metrics they use is deploys per day, which those that know me well know I'm not a huge fan of, but I get it, it's something. But I noticed something among the low performers this year. Their deployment frequency went up. They were deploying more often, like we say, woo, yay, do the thing. But their deployments got worse. Their mean time to recovery went up. Their failure rates went up. The high performers didn't, but the low performers did. Okay? One theory about this is that they were driving to that metric. I've heard it mentioned a couple times in the last couple days, and I couldn't agree more, that people drive to what you measure them on. And these organizations were trying to improve their deployments per day, and they weren't doing it well. They weren't doing all the testing. They weren't doing the security. They weren't doing the compliance, et cetera, et cetera. And so I kind of zoned out for a minute while we're sitting there at dinner, which people that know me know I do that too. And I got to thinking about, okay, what's something where, I started at 0, or even less than 0, so misconceptions or what have you, and had to learn a skill or something, and became reasonably good at it. And it's interesting, it's kind of a theme for this DevOps Days. It was boot camp. I didn't know anything about this stuff. And so I actually wrote the abstract for this talk the next day, and submitted it, and thank you for accepting it. So the title talk, everything I need to know, DevOps I learned in the Marines. There wasn't a lot in boot camp. So actually, who's younger than 32 years old? Okay, I hate you. 32 years ago, last month, I graduated Marine Corps boot camp, so I'm not a combat veteran or anything like that. And they definitely didn't teach Puppet and Chef and Salt Stack and stuff there. So that's not DevOps. What I mean is the culture of learning and sharing and that kind of stuff. So I actually left this out, but I put it back in because of Corey. Yeah, so I'm a technology evangelist at ThoughtWorks. I've been there for about 9 years. And yet another DevOps Days organizer on Twitter, and ken.wtf for a blog that I don't update very often if you want to see it. I'm going to take 2 times during this talk on a fairly serious topic, and I don't want to be a downer, but I do want to do the right thing. I am not a combat veteran. There are people in this room who are. This presentation does have images of Marine Corps boot camp. There are images of people preparing to fire weapons. There's no audio. PTSD is a very real thing. I get a little choked up about it. If you're affected and want to excuse yourself, I will not be at all insulted. So, what you do is when you go to boot camp, is you show up and you're like, okay, I'm excited now. I'm happy. These guys on the bus. They've arrived at Lindbergh Field in San Diego. So when I went to boot camp, there was no MapQuest, there was no Google Maps, et cetera. And so we didn't really know how far we had to go. So we get on the bus and we're like, okay, we're good. 12 minutes later, we pull up. It's interesting, I was talking to Pete Cheslock, who also was a Hollywood Marine. So those of us that were born lived west of the Mississippi went to San Diego. People born on this side of the country go to Parris Island. He said the drive took him an hour and a half. So it turns out boot camp has a FIFO queue. Bus pulls up, they shave your head, you do the things, and until that bus is gone, the next bus can't pull in. Now, he went in 1998. They did know where it was, so he was freaking out a little bit. He's been there for an hour. But we're on the bus, and in thinking about this and thinking back, it was this. I don't know if everybody's seen the Gartner hype curve, and I haven't seen all the talks, so I don't know if somebody's already shown it. But generally speaking, when we're looking at something and we're going to change and we're going to save the world, et cetera, there's a peak of inflated expectations. Oh, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to be a Marine. I can move tanks with my arm. And, just whatever. But then things tend to get worse before they get better. So we get off the bus, and we meet some people who we come to know very well. We're very helpful gentlemen. They're not particularly friendly. I should say this is probably a DevOps anti-pattern. If you're a manager, please don't convert to this style. But we learned very quick, what did we get ourselves into? You know, so they set us up for a spa day. That was kind of fun. They actually warn you if you have any moles, tell us, because they're coming off if you don't. And also, there's some folks in here that have different branches of the military. I want to acknowledge my experiences in the Marine Corps. Different people have different experiences. Yeah, so where's Chris? Is Chris North in here? Or Chris Short is in here? Yeah, Air Force, anyway. But at this point, I mean, we're like, oh, what did I do? I mean, trough of disillusionment again. So you finish the intake, which you're convinced took hours, but actually took less than an hour. And when you're doing the intake thing, it's really interesting because it's lowest common denominator, but I mean, I don't think it's really in an insulting way. It's hold your belt in your left hand. You know, now put it on, I mean, literally, like step by step by step. And so you're doing like, okay, this is really silly. We're doing all these incredibly specific things. I know how to put on a belt, okay? I don't need this. But then we find out that that's really pervasive at the beginning. So, you know, this picture, this is a squad bay. It's not anything else. It's not a bunkhouse, or it's a squad bay. And those are racks, and we'll get into that more. And those young gentlemen are sitting in a specific style on a concrete floor, and that's called the classroom. And a whole lot of instruction happens in the classroom. If you've never sat in that particular way, with your pelvis sticking out on a concrete floor for an hour, try it. It's not comfortable. It's like, why do we have to sit this way? Okay, but you do. Basically, if you're not moving in boot camp, you're sitting in this fashion, you're kneeling, or you're standing. That's it. There's no other acceptable solutions. If you're not able to do it, they figure, okay, we need to do some conditioning here, so you get to do a little exercise. There's sand pits outside. At least the ones I went to weren't full of sand fleas, which the ones in Parris Island are. But they figure, hey, if I can't do that, then I need some exercise. So this is kind of their answer to everything. Now, part of the reason I want to do this talk is because, as we're going to go through, you're going to see that in the military, there's very specific names for specific things. And I'm kind of a stickler to that personally, too. So, like, I do a talk that says it's not CD if you can't deploy right now. I maintain that if there's not a system that you can walk up to right this second, click a button, and it deploys your latest good build to production, you're not doing continuous delivery. Okay, you might have really good automated build and test, and you might be doing some things, and I'm not saying that you're a horrible person. I mean, Corey's absolutely right. Just because Google's doesn't mean you need to do it. But the purpose of CD is to say that I can deploy it at any time, should I need to. You don't necessarily do it, but you could. Okay, so again, I think words matter. Back to boot camp. This friendly gentleman is not wearing a hat. What's he wearing, Tiffany? A cover. That is a cover. He's not wearing a shirt. He is wearing a Class C blouse. Not just any blouse, okay? So if the orders of the day for the next day come up and they say you're going to wear your Class Cs, everyone's going to put on that shirt because it's a specific term and everybody knows what it is and everybody agrees what it is and no one's surprised. That is not a bed, that is a rack. That is not a loo, it is not a toilet, it is not a restroom, it is not a washroom, that is the head. The picture I found that was public domain was a little older than when I went there, not a lot. The dividers are exactly the same. Yeah. Not big on privacy in the boot camp. And again, if you get these words wrong, if you say you can't find your hat, then you must not have had enough exercise. Okay. And often this isn't on the sand. Often this is in the classroom. Remember, concrete floor? And so again, I really think words matter, at least at the team and organizational level. So some people don't know this. The term DevOps actually came from DevOps Days. The founders of DevOps Days in 2009 created the term. They actively refused to define it because they're like, yeah, it's just going to get twisted, what have you. This is my definition. My purpose for sharing this is so that you know when I say DevOps, this is what I mean. If you feel like it's something you want to adopt, there's a blog that actually breaks it down by clause. Feel free. If you don't, that's fine too. But come up with your own then. And in your organization, when you say this team is doing DevOps, that person needs to know what you mean. Okay? If for you that means there's a certain level of automation, okay, I don't love it, but okay. But they need to know that you're wearing Class Cs. Okay? So they don't show up with the wrong uniform and just look dumb. There's no shortage of words that you're going to have to agree on for this, okay? And I mean, it's a term of art, you know. It's when you're writing the code, there's certain, you have to use the right method name. Okay, this should be no different because human communication is the hard part. You've heard that over and over, and it couldn't be more true. So we actually did a survey last year, and I won't claim that it was super scientific because it was sent to like our Twitter followers and so forth. But we asked them, are you doing this technical practice? And SurveyMonkey, if you say yes, then it'll show you different questions on the next page. And if people said yes, then we said, okay, are you doing these things? And a lot of times people said they were doing a thing that they weren't doing the thing. The one that really scared me was this. Only 10% of the respondents differentiated having a tool from doing the thing. Okay, I mean, if you have Jenkins, if you have GhostCD, if you have, Concord, whatever, okay, that does not mean you're doing continuous integration or continuous delivery. You still have to do the work, okay? So again, this is what I mean by that. Now, a lot of stuff in bootcamp and stuff is also making sure that you have really good basics, and I think the same is true for what we do for the automation. I believe that you cannot do effective continuous delivery if you don't have effective continuous integration. This is how we define it. Again, this one I'm a little more stickler on because some of our early pioneers did define it. This is from Jez Humble's blog, who I know his name's been dropped a lot. But for us, if you're not pushing into trunk, master, whatever you want to call it, every single day, you're not doing continuous integration. If you want to work on your own branch and push every day, that's fine, okay? But if you have a branch and it lives for more than a day, before it gets pushed back, you're not doing CI. You might be doing good build and test, not CI. Does every commit trigger your test? Daily builds, not CI. Again, it might be the right thing. Corey was right. Just because this is the definition that I come up with, or that we use, doesn't mean it's right for you, but just call it the right thing. When the build is broken, is it fixed immediately? When Jez gives these 3 points, he says, is it fixed within 10 minutes? Now, he's talking about like unit tests and so forth. So, little self-organizing team, the old Amazon two-pizza team, build turns red, you fix it. You don't ever leave the server red. Oh, it's a flaky test. The network might be bad. That's a service from a vendor that doesn't have a good safety on it, and what have you. So it goes red. And then a week later, you find out that's not why it was red. It was actually a real failure. Things that make your build red, just take the test out. It's worse than no test. Okay? If you don't, your boss is probably not going to make you go out into the sandpit. Okay? You're going to look more like that. Because now you have to go through a week's code and figure out the thing, and we've all done it, right? We've all been there. So as boot camp goes on, you get in about the middle. I want to say it was week 6 or 7. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you go out to start field training, and you start learning that all these things they were making you do that they didn't explain why, and again, I'm not saying this is a training program you should implement, but they didn't explain why we were doing those things, but it turns out there was good reasons behind a lot of it. I mentioned the classroom, sitting like that. By the time we get to field training, we've been sitting like that a month and a half, so kneeling or standing. You can't answer. Anybody know what those 3 things signify? Those are shooting positions. This young woman is sitting on a standard Marine Corps rifle range. If you can see it, that green thing or sign up to the right of her is a yardage marker. It says 200. Okay, in basic training, Marines shoot 20 shots from 200 yards, 20 shots from 300 yards, 10 shots from 500 yards. They've added some more combat stuff since I've been there since then. There are no sandbags, there are no braces, there are no tripods, there are no nothing. It's you providing a stable platform. I don't want to glorify, there's been a lot of weapons stuff lately, but being able to sit like that and hit a stable platform to a target this big from 300 yards away doesn't work if your butt hurts. Okay, but she's been sitting on concrete for 6 or 7 weeks, doesn't hurt. So that silly thing of sitting in there, there's a reason for it. She's now conditioned where that does not hurt. Stand at attention for hours because you can stand still. That's how you shoot from 200 yards. If anybody's here, there's a rifle person at all, when I went, see how he's got iron sights, no scope? Those distances were not a scope. Now they have a 2x scope? It's not really a scope, but, and you have to be able to hold that. And of course, the kneeling position. So when I got boot camp, I had shot a BB gun, but nothing else. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be horrible. I don't have any idea what to do. And there were others there who were like avid hunters, and they were like, I got this. And the first thing you do is you actually, I don't know if they still do this, but you go to this very incredibly short, like 40 feet type thing, at a tiny little target. And they have you shoot at it because they just want to see the grouping. They want to see where you're coming from. The people with the most experience shooting did the worst because they had horrible habits. Those of us who'd never shot before, they do a thing, brass, I'll never forget it, breathe, relax, aim, squeeze, shoot. They teach you, how to do these things, and we were actually pretty good. And so we're like, now we're ready, okay, now we're gonna shoot. We're gonna go out on range and we're gonna shoot. And so we come to this stage. Now, notice the barrel with the targets on it that this gentleman's sighting in on. Notice also that there's people behind the barrel. So that's probably not a terribly safe shooting position. But he's not actually shooting. For a week, you do what's called snapping in. You're sitting on the grass with a big red plug in the barrel to make sure, I almost called it a gun. If you've seen Full Metal Jacket, I'm not gonna do the song of this is my rifle, this is my gun, but they actually make you do that. But they make the weapons incredibly safe. But you're sitting there for a week practicing the positions and practicing pulling the trigger before they're ever given a live round. And so we're practicing all these things over and over and over so that they become muscle memory. One of my favorite quotes back to what we do for a living, most of us, is Kent Beck. Now, Kent is a great programmer, but whatever. But he also has really, really good habits. So what if we worked on the same level of muscle memory with what we do? So we get a thing to work on. We're gonna work on the thing. We're gonna fix the bug. We're gonna write the story. We're gonna do the thing. The first thing we do is write a test. Cote, is it really 22% doing TDD? Is he here? Scary. We write some code. We run the test. When the test passes, we commit to trunk, and we're done. Test-driven development or what have you. Guess what? The horrible metric of test coverage you get for free. And I know TDD is not for everybody, but again, it's the habits, the repeatable habit. If I do it this way every time, then I'm less prone to make errors. And so what we end up doing is start coming back up the slope of enlightenment. Now, okay, we're doing CI, which means we have to do trunk-based development, but I'm writing tests first, so I know that I'm not gonna make the build server go red all the time. It all kind of builds. When they wrote the book on extreme programming, they said these are the practices, and choose the ones that work for you and don't choose the others, and that's cool. I actually don't think that's true for continuous delivery. I think that everything is so built in that you kind of have to do the things, all the things. Same with the DevOps culture, but especially for the technology, in my opinion. Now, we're deploying software. I love Corey's, Twitter for Pets or something like that, where he talks about different risks with different things. There are people here that work for banks. That's a different level of risk than people that do, generate memes from cats. In boot camp, we have this thing called the obstacle course. And I also really like that people acknowledged earlier that the military actually doesn't want robots. They want problem solvers. And so for the most part, they say, there's the obstacle course, go. Thou shalt. They don't really talk about how to climb a rope at first. They don't really do any of those things. They just let you go. Because the truth is, if she falls, she's falling onto wood chips and what have you, and she's probably not going to get hurt. I mean, I'm not saying twisted ankles don't happen and so forth, but it's not a high-risk profile. What they really want to see is that if she struggles, that the recruit next to her helps her, and those kinds of things. It's team building, et cetera. There's not a lot of risk there. Okay, but the week after you do that, you do this. That's a lot more risk. Okay, it's the rappelling wall. So there's a different level of instruction and verification for this class of risk. In this case, they sit there and they show you, and I promise this is not, I mean, it might be a staged photo, but we are watching that intently because we already saw the tower. And this gentleman in this case is showing the proper way, rappelling methods and how they do it and everything else. And then a pure moment of panic comes in when they tell you, okay, grab your rope. You're tying your own rope. We're not handing you one. And everyone's like, oh, how do I do this? Because again, you saw the wall. But no less than 3 instructors are going to check every single knot you tied. And as you go through, if they find a problem, they're going to basically take it off, say start over, refactor it, whatever. And at this point in bootcamp, they're actually kind of building you up. It's, So when we talk about training on these types of testing and those kinds of things, this is kind of what I mean, okay? There's a safety net here. Someone could get seriously hurt or killed. And so there's 3 people that check all the knots, minimum. We can do the same thing in our pipelines. Okay, so modern continuous delivery tools are very good at doing things in parallel. All the different cloud providers these days, I mean, it's not free, but they're pretty cheap. And heck, there's lots of free levels too. People say, I don't want to run my security tests every time. I don't want to run my compliance tests every time. I don't want to run my performance tests every time because they take too long, or, et cetera. No, don't do that. The other thing I hear a lot is, I can get to production in 10 minutes. I'm sorry, but that's not a thing. Okay, so, and I'm trying to use the clean version. There are occasions, there should be a way in your continuous delivery pipeline that if you need to in an emergency, you can skip all that stuff. Okay, so there needs to be a way that you can get the initial, whatever it is, MSI, JAR, DLL, whatever, put it on production using your real pipeline, not SSHing into the machine. Okay, but then the other stuff still runs on it. Okay, so you're still verifying it. But, I mean, security things happen, emergencies happen. There may be a reason you need to get to production in 10 minutes, but on a normal case, it's just not a thing. I would recommend, just to chime in again, what your particular tolerance for risk is. Okay, to me, the purpose of a staging server is to test the deployment itself. And so, in this case, we're saying, okay, every time the functional security and compliance tests go, then I'm going to deploy to a staging server. The staging server is on a more trusted network, so I'm not even, if the security tests go, no, you can't even do that. This stuff all has to pass before you can get onto that network. And this is obviously just a random example. But maybe I'm running performance tests that are long running. I'm running soak tests that take hours or days or what have you. Okay, I'm not going to block a staging deployment because I want to test the deployment as often as possible, but I am going to block production. I'm not going to let you introduce a performance problem into production. And it might be that performance tests in this case only run once for every 4 times the other things run. That's fine, but they're running at every opportunity they have. Okay, and again, this stuff is not expensive anymore. Obviously, I work for a company that does, but all the other people too. You can auto-scale build agents. You can do these things. This is not hard to do anymore. And if you skip these things, if you're not doing the security tests and you're not doing the compliance tests, you look like that. Okay, and we don't want to be unhappy, and we see it in the news at least once a month. Some major company that loses massive amounts of data for something that was just never tested. But when we start doing that, now we start getting the plateau of productivity. So now, I already mentioned it gets worse before it gets better, but also notice that the plateau of productivity is not quite what we really thought. It was inflated expectations. A coworker tells a joke all the time. He said, yeah, Agile saves you 50% and DevOps saves you 50%, so just do both and don't ever have to work again. Doesn't actually work. Okay, so this is work, and it's an ongoing thing, but you can get there. Now, as you do get more mature, it's very important that you practice like you play. I actually had the Simeon Army slide in here. I almost put it back in when Corey was talking about it. Because it's important that things are being tested the way they really would be. The book, Continuous Delivery, that Jez Humble wrote would not exist if they had been deploying to Solaris on the project he was on 10 years ago on a regular basis. They weren't. They were writing Java on Windows. By the time they did put it on a Solaris box, it crashed. He's like, oh, maybe we should be deploying to production-like environments more often. That's where the CD book came from. Okay. I'm tempted to put Tiffany on the spot. I won't. This young lady's being asked a question. And she's being asked it in a way that maybe isn't very polite. But she's being asked it in a way because these folks are going to work in an incredibly stressful environment. Okay, this country's been at war for 16 years. And they need to be able to think under stress. So, and I'm going to cheat because I went to boot camp 32 years ago. If she asks her oh my gosh, I didn't have, a fourth general order is. Do you know it? To repeat all calls from posts more distant from the guardhouse than my own. And that better be the exact answer, or she gets to exercise. You know, who's the commandant of the Marine Corps? What's the muzzle velocity of an M16, A2, or A4, whatever, when you went? You know, what's the maximum effect? All these questions, they have to be able to, okay, boot camp's physical, but it's also very, very mental. And the point is that when you're in that stress, you know, and it's a battalion commander asking you that question during an inspection, and if you don't get it, your whole platoon's going to not do as well, and then everyone's in trouble, and, you know, et cetera. It's a way of reacting. The same thing's true for any other activity. You know, if you're a golfer and you're practicing and you're just going up there and you're not really practicing, you're building bad muscle memory. If you're writing code, whatever you're doing, you need to practice the way you're going to play. Actually, I did put it back in. Everybody, I mean, I think everyone's seen this, right? Corey was joking about it earlier. So Netflix does have a thing, the Simeon Army. Chaos Monkey goes out and randomly kills machines in production. Not in development, not in staging, in production. And the services have to self-heal. New services get to opt out for like 4 to 6 months, something like that. But once you're a mature, used service in the well-established interfaces, they will just reach out from time to time and kill machines on your service and make sure it self-heals. Guaranteed, machines have gone down while you've been watching a movie and you didn't notice. But they have these for all kinds of things. I'll skip over the baby. A little bit about organizational structure. And I mentioned there's 2 parts of this where I'm going to get fairly serious. I will never forget Sergeant Johnson, senior drill instructor of Platoon 2097 at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, when somebody said something racist, and he came back with this. When DevOps people talk about diversity, it's not just because the social good about diversity. It's because you need those outlooks, those viewpoints on your team. Okay, your customer does not look like you. I don't care what you look like, they don't look like you. You have different people using them and so forth. The reason that we want to get cross-functional teams, the reason why we want to actually speak to DBAs, you know, and so forth, is we need those viewpoints. We need to not make those mistakes, not being thrown over the wall. So we're all team members, hence my definition of DevOps, where it's a team. And with that, I'm going to definitely abuse my privilege, and I want to introduce you to Maria Dom. Maria Dom was born, in a Russian prison. Was adopted by Americans when her mother died. Joined the Marine Corps. Now, in 1987, we have to requalify with rifle every year. I had a woman in Marine that was my rifle instructor. Best shot I ever saw. I mean, you know, choose your cliche, hit a tick off a dog, whatever. Best shot I ever saw. She worked in the motor pool because she wasn't allowed to carry a weapon. Maria was one of 4 women that was the first people introduced into the School of Infantry 1 year ago this month. So again, you know, the capabilities are there. Don't, you know, take your blinders off. Enough soapbox. Next thing about organizational structure. This is the actual organizational structure of 1st Marine Division at Camp Pendleton, California, where I was done. It's been mentioned many times earlier about, you know, self-organizing teams and so forth like that, and people think that the military is the ultimate in command control. It's really not. It's the ultimate in mission, that everybody agrees on the mission, but This is Iwo Jima. This is the battle plan for attacking Iwo Jima in World War II. Notice the different sections and so forth. So units were told, you got white 1, you got white 2, you got brown 1, you got brown 2. This is your objective. This is the time when we need you to be there in order that we all sync up. And that's it. The units decided how to do the thing. They didn't tell them how to equip, how to do whatever. They had standardized things. You know, I couldn't agree more with Cote about like a platform for technology. They had a way that everything worked together. They all used the same landing craft so they fit on the same boat, and, you know, et cetera. But they didn't tell them down to the level. This is a Marine fire team. They all have very specific jobs, these 4 people. They all know each other's job. And they're the ones that are saying very specific targets. Take that building, that tree, that whatever. They are not told how. Basic training and infantry training gave them the skills and you know, they're doing TDD or whatever. Okay, but they decide. So I'm a huge proponent of self-organizing teams. So yes, you need to have platforms and policies and what have you. It's not probably a good idea to have 47 different databases. But then let your teams decide how best to do the feature, how best to do the deployment, et cetera. They're the ones on the ground. They're the ones that can make the decision and react to the change. The required summary slide. Okay. So if you're sitting in this room and you're like, I don't even know where to start, you know, that you're okay. You might actually be better off because you don't have a bunch of stuff that you have to go fix that's going down the wrong path, and et cetera. So deep breath. That said, it will get worse before it gets better. So if you're being measured on things like story point velocity, well, after you slap the person that's doing that, let them know that that's going to go down because now you have to build a bunch of infrastructure and those types of things. Okay. Words matter. If you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen me getting in arguments with people about how much words matter. I'm not saying that we all have to agree on what CI is or CD is or what DevOps is, but you inside your organization, you have to agree. Or there's going to be miscommunication. People are going to say, yep, I did the security testing, no problem, and what you did was scan for, you know, critical vulnerability, you know, CVEs, but you didn't actually test, you know, logins. Okay, you need to understand and agree what these things are. Good habits become muscle memory in everything. We're talking about giving talks and how well you know the talk and that kind of stuff, and you know, I kind of have to look at mine a little bit. If you ever watch a TED Talk, it's muscle memory. It's like you can sing Happy Birthday while you're doing the dishes because you know it so well that you don't have to think about the words to the Happy Birthday song. Okay, that can be the same way when you're writing the code and everything. It can be muscle memory. I said practice while you play. I'm a big champion for self-organized teams. They can react to change. Who was the boxer? Was it Tyson that said everyone has a plan until they get punched? I mean, same thing's true with military planning. Same thing's true with agile planning. Same thing's true with everything, okay? You have to be able to react, and to react, you have to be close to where the change happens. So that's why I like self-organized teams. If you're interested, there's a URL there that all the business are public domain. The military is pretty good about doing copyright there. If you ever need some or want to look at through or whatever. There's also backstories on a lot of it. That's how I learned about PFC Maria Dom. GoCD.org for our thing. I'm at Mugrage. Thank you for your time.